Welcome to the woods on a rather damp Tuesday afternoon. Glorious weather for the weekend, which was rather surprising. After a year and a half of torrential rain, we were allowed 4 days of respite. But it looks as if it's back to normal now. Back to grey and wet and raining. But we soldier on, and it's been a while since I've had time to sit down and have a chat. The last couple of weeks have been really busy. I've had a lot going on at work. I've had a lot to do at the small holding here, and the weather's been against me. But those few warm days, those few days without rain, there's quite a lot I had to get done. I've been dealing with solicitors for the land purchase for the Woodlander initiative. That's mind-boggling, hard going, a lot of documentation to get through. I've been dealing with solicitors for the Woodlander initiative company. So the last 2 weeks have been pretty busy, and it's nice to be able to sit down eventually and just have a chat, because we're in a strange kind of limbo at the moment, and I'm sure it's not just me that feels like that. We're in this time where everyone I talk to feels like something's about to happen. Something big is coming. And it's a feeling. Nobody seems to know what it is. It reminds me of a phrase I heard years ago called credit blur. And this is something that happened a lot in the early 80s. People getting themselves into financial trouble because credit was so easy to access. And people would get themselves into a position where they had 4 or 5 credit cards, bank loans, loans to shops, cars on HP, and they would take money from one credit card and pay it off another credit card, and take money from here to pay a gas bill there, and robbing Peter to pay Paul. Until in the end, the sheer number of credit facilities they had, money they owed to different people, became too much to cope with, and it paralysed them. Literally, they were left thinking, I have no idea what's going on, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. It was so easy to come by, and now it's too complicated to fathom out. And it can get to the position where it does literally paralyse a person, that they're unable to do anything, that they start to shut down. And I've seen some of that, but for different reasons, happening to people today. Because after the lockdowns, the introduction of vaccines, house arrest, social distancing, after all of that, and then the Ukraine war, and then the attack on farmers, combined with people's awareness of what was going on, and people starting to look for answers, which led them down very many rabbit holes, it can become too much. There's too much information available to people. Everything becomes a conspiracy. Chemtrails in the sky, the farms being shut down, alien invasions, World War III. And the most recent one is obviously the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Israelis being charged with genocide by the Court of Human Rights. And what does that mean long term for us in this country and throughout Europe? People are left paralysed, not knowing what to do, not knowing what to believe. Too much information and trying to figure it all out. It kind of reminds me of an old television series, The X-Files, in the 90s, I think, which highlighted the hidden information and disinformation that was put out by government agencies to muddy waters, to confuse people. And I think we're seeing some of that today. It's difficult to sort the wheat from the chaff. Everything seems to have a grain of truth. And you do get to the stage where you're desperately trying to figure out what's happening, what's going on. And the reason you're trying to do that is because we've got this feeling that things are going to change. And I think they are. I think the truth of it is they've told us what they're doing. But they're trying to make sure we look in another direction whilst they continue to do it. And it's not complicated. A lot of it was highlighted over the last 3 or 4 years. Different groups, different NGOs, different organisations. The World Economic Forum, probably the most well known now. And this global move towards a new system. They've told us they wanted to do it. They've started implementing it. And all the problems we see around us are tied into that. And there's so many issues facing us today. The mass immigration into the UK has become so large and at such a speed it's eye-watering. A statistic I heard the other day which made me stop in my tracks. 1 in every 60 people in this country is an immigrant who came to live here in the last 12 months. 1 in 60 is an immigrant that came here in the last 12 months. That's insane. And the pressure that these millions of people puts on every aspect of this country is unbearable. People cannot afford to buy a house because there's not enough houses. If you let in 1.2 million people and build 120,000 houses, you're not even covering the people you're letting in, never mind the people here. You can't get to see a doctor because there isn't enough doctors. Classroom sizes rise weekly. The education system is crumbling. It cannot cope. The police service no longer tackles crimes. It now concentrates on policing ideology and thought. We're at that point. If you're burgled, the police will do nothing. We know this. If your car's stolen, you'll just be given a crime number. And yet if you write something on Twitter or X that runs counter to the current narrative, you'll get visited and reprimanded by the police. More and more legislation, more and more laws being introduced to curb your speech and curb your thought process. All of these things are happening. The diversification of our population, our crumbling infrastructure, our redundant police service, a legal system that props up a corrupt system. We're faced with an organisation, a government, and I say government flippantly because it doesn't matter if it's blue, red, yellow, green. It's all part of the same organisation that will tell us on the one hand they're not going to get rid of cash, and then slowly every bank shuts its doors. There were 6 in my small town 2 years ago. There's now 1, and that closes its doors in November. No banks, nowhere to put your money, nowhere to take your money out. There are public houses on the high street of a small market town, 300 years old, who won't accept cash because they can't get it to a bank, so you have to use a credit card. And everything moves that way until it's not the government getting rid of cash, it's that people stop using it because it's incredibly difficult. And once cash is gone, they really have got control of everything you do. If you can manage to get to a bank, they won't actually allow you to pay large sums of cash in. And if you want to take your money out, you'll have to explain to them, and in some cases prove to them what you want the money for. And if you can't prove it, they're quite within their rights to withhold it. And they are within their rights. And they are doing it. And we may say that's wrong, that should never happen, but it is. And we're living through a cost of living crisis, which is severely hurting people. More and more people turning to food banks. I never thought I'd see food banks in this country, and yet they've become a necessity for working families. Energy bills, food prices, fuel prices, all rising, which leaves people with very little money. And because they've got very little money, they don't spend it in the businesses in their town, and those businesses close, which leads to more people dependent on the state, which is exactly what they want. More people with less money, more businesses will shut, because you can only afford the necessities. And this is where they want you. This is what's coming. I'm not expecting a huge revelation. It's already begun. Little bit by little bit. And yes, they're ramping it up. And wouldn't it be great if everyone woke up to what was happening? We've been saying that for nigh on 100 years. The fact of the matter is, most people are so comfortable that as long as they've got access to entertainment and convenience, they don't want things to change. You may very well understand what's coming, what's already begun. The slow restrictions on a life worth living. But most people don't see it. They've been bought with comfort and convenience. And maybe they will wake up when it's too late. And it keeps on moving forward. They keep on pushing that agenda. The attacks on farms have been highlighted by many, but that'll be forgotten as something more important comes onto the horizon. But less farms means less food, less self-sufficiency for the nation. It leaves us dependent on others. And again, that's exactly where they want you. Dependent. They're slowly changing the culture, the infrastructure, the people, to suit a new system. They want people who are happy to sit around doing nothing, receiving very little, and just surviving. And that's not us. That's not us. So what do we do? How do we make things better? Well, the traditional method of changing things would have been through politics. But I've said this before, and some of you don't like it, but the political path is well and truly blocked. It is not open. For several reasons. The biggest one being what I just said, which is that the majority of people don't want change. They're quite happy, thank you, and aren't looking for you to save them from anything. The second reason is that the system itself has put measures in place to ensure its own survival, and that means blocking access to us. We haven't got 5, 10, 15, 20 years to build a political party, to gain political power. And I think you'd be extraordinarily lucky to do it in 20 years. They're herding us to those 15-minute areas, to those neighbourhoods, where everything you need, your necessities, will be available, where you'll have no access to a vehicle. Petrol and diesel cars will be phased out over the next 5 to 10 years. Cash will be gone. You will be limited in order to save the planet, so that'll be all right. And whatever excuse they use, they do mean to push forward with these things. And if we can't change things through political means, I would suggest you put yourself in a position, and your family, where you are as self-sufficient as you possibly can be. And I'm not advocating for everyone to suddenly go and buy a piece of land, build a cabin and run a homestead. It's not for everyone. Some people couldn't do it, some people don't want to do it, and that's fine. But you can all become more self-sufficient. You can grow some food. You could keep some hens. I'm preaching to the converted, to a lot of you. Self-sufficiency for oneself is a great thing. Self-sufficiency as a community is even better. So we build community online, in the real world. It's not just me, but others as well are looking at buying land with groups of people, looking at how we can utilise that land. putting ourselves in a position of power, because we can't get there through traditional means. So we have to initially safeguard ourselves and our community, and then look at spreading that out as more and more people realise it's an alternative. You can't just stay in the system and hope that it will change. It's not going to. And if we understand that we can't change it unless we've got power, we need to look at how we can improve things a different way. We can build again. We're going to have to. I don't want my grandkids to grow up in the system they've designed for them. I want them to be free. I want them to have freedom. And if they're not going to allow that in their system, I will do everything in my means to build another one. Anyway, you lot, thank you for listening to me ramble on. I'll speak to you soon.